In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, light shimmered from crystal walls that reached higher than any human cathedral. Delegates from 100 worlds filled the seats, their colors bright, their voices calm and proud. Translators floated above them, turning every sound into soft music-like tones. It was meant to be a place of unity. But one corner of the chamber always stayed quiet. That corner belonged to Sura of the Velnar. Her people once lived on a storm-scarred world near the edge of the spiral arm. Long ago, the Velnar fought a war for survival, and the scars of that war still showed on her gray skin. Acid winds had roughened her face, and her right eye had lost its shine. Most delegates avoided even meeting her gaze. To them, she was a living reminder of things ugly and broken. Sura had stopped caring about whispers years ago. She sat alone, her long coat wrapped tight, listening to the talks about trade, borders, and peace treaties. Each speech was the same, proud words from those who had never known real loss. That day, a new delegate arrived from a young world. The banners read Earth, Human Federation. Some in the chamber laughed quietly. Others looked curious. Humans were still newcomers, not yet trusted. The human envoy entered, tall, simple in uniform, no armor or jewelry. His name was Captain Elias Ward, a man known more for action than speech. He looked around for a seat. The only empty chair was beside Sura. Every other species avoided that spot, pretending it was invisible. Elias noticed the empty seat, then noticed the woman sitting next to it. For a heartbeat, he studied her scarred face, not with fear or pity, but simple curiosity. And then he walked straight toward it. Gasps rippled through the hall as he sat down. The translator drones hesitated, confused. Sura looked sideways, uncertain. "You don't have to sit here," she said quietly. "They will stare." Elias smiled. "They already are." His voice was calm, deep, with the easy tone of someone who didn't care what others thought. Sura looked at him again. His face was lined with travel and sun, not young but strong. She sensed no mockery, only simple respect. When the session began, the council president announced the agenda, the human request for a resource-sharing treaty. The debate grew loud. Some delegates called the humans reckless and dangerous. Others feared their fast-growing fleets. One counselor from the Sharn species turned toward Sura. "Perhaps the human should ask the Velnar for advice," he sneered. "They also claim peace before burning half a sector." Laughter followed. Sura stayed silent, her hands folded. But Elias leaned forward. "Excuse me," he said, his tone steady. "The record shows the Velnar War began after others invaded their home. If you mock them for defending themselves, what lesson do you teach? That survival is shame?" The hall grew quiet. The Sharn delegate blinked in surprise. Humans were supposed to stay polite and small, not challenge elder races. Elias continued. "Earth learned from its own wars. We've made mistakes too, but we don't judge a whole people for their scars." Sura turned her head slowly toward him. No one had spoken like that in centuries. After the meeting, she left the hall quickly, trying not to feel anything. But as she reached the observation deck, she found Elias standing there, hands behind his back, watching the curve of the nearby planet. "You didn't have to speak for me," she said. He looked at her. "I didn't. I spoke because it was right." She didn't answer. For years, words like right had sounded empty. Yet somehow, coming from him, they felt solid again. They stood in silence. Through the glass, 1,000 ships drifted like sparks of light. The human's reflection beside hers looked small but unafraid. That night, rumors spread fast. The human sat with the Velnar. He defended her in session. Some laughed, some frowned. A few called it human foolishness and a weakness for broken things. Elias ignored them all. The next day, he returned to the same seat beside her. When Sura saw him coming, she felt a strange tightness in her chest, something between confusion and warmth. The session began again. This time, when she spoke about atmospheric shielding, a topic most had ignored from her before, Elias nodded and listened carefully. When another delegate interrupted her, Elias raised a hand politely. "Let her finish," Sura continued, her voice growing stronger. For the first time in years, others listened too. Later, as they left the hall, she stopped him. "Why do you keep sitting here?" "Because it's a good view of the whole chamber," he said with a faint grin. "And you don't talk nonsense." She laughed softly, a sound so rare she almost didn't recognize it. "Humans are strange." "True," he replied. But sometimes strange is good. That evening she told him about her homeworld, about the storms that burned through the seas, about the cities rebuilt from melted stone. Elias listened, asking quiet questions. He spoke about Earth, about deserts, oceans, and people who could fight fiercely but still plant gardens afterward. As the lights dimmed, the stars outside brightened like silver dust. Sura realized she had spoken more words to him in one day than to anyone in the last 10 years. Over the next week, others began to notice. The human and the ugly alien walked together through the corridors, sometimes talking, sometimes just silent. Some stared, some turned away, but a few nodded in quiet approval. One morning, Sura found a small object on her desk, a simple carved stone with earth symbols etched into it. Elias had left it there, for luck, the note said. She ran her rough fingers over the smooth edges. It wasn't valuable, but it meant more than gold. When the council held another vote, a delegate tried again to insult her people. This time she spoke up before Elias could. Her voice was calm, strong. The Velnar made mistakes. But we also learned. We survived. That is what matters. After the session, Elias met her outside again. You spoke well, he said. I learned from a human, she replied quietly. He smiled, eyes warm. Then maybe I learned something too. The corridor lights glowed blue around them. For the first time in her long life, Sura felt seen, not as a scarred reminder of the past, but as someone who still mattered. When she returned to her quarters, she stood before the mirror. The same rough skin, the same damaged eye, yet somehow it didn't seem as ugly anymore. Maybe it never had been. Maybe ugliness was just what others refused to understand. In the silence of her room, she thought of Elias Ward, the human who had walked straight through shame, gossip, and fear to sit beside her without hesitation. The galaxy might laugh, but she knew now that humanity's real power wasn't its ships or technology. It was courage, the quiet kind that saw worth where others saw nothing. And for the first time in many cycles, Sura smiled, because someone had finally chosen to sit beside her. Weeks passed quietly on the Galactic Council station, and everyone had something to say about the human and the Velnar woman. Some called it strange. Others said it was brave. Most simply didn't understand. Yet every morning, Captain Elias Ward still sat beside Sura of the Velnar, no matter how many whispers followed them through the long marble halls. He never looked embarrassed, never lowered his eyes. And Sura, who had learned to expect only silence and stares, slowly began to forget what it felt like to be alone. At first, the council members had thought the human was trying to prove a point, to gain attention or sympathy, but then something began to change. During one discussion on planetary defenses, Elias mentioned that Sura's people had once built shields strong enough to survive acid storms, storms that melted metal. When the humans started colonizing new worlds, those same kinds of storms had destroyed half their research stations. Sura explained how the Velnar used layered crystals and plasma vents to resist corrosion. At first no one listened, until Elias asked her to demonstrate. She sketched her people's methods in the air with a holographic pen, showing how their designs used nature's own pressure to strengthen the shields. The council's scientists looked amazed. Within hours, the human delegation requested her assistance. That was how Sura found herself working side by side with humans for the first time. The lab was bright and full of motion. Humans laughing, arguing, dropping tools, fixing them again. She found it noisy but oddly comforting. Elias visited every day, sometimes to check progress, sometimes just to bring her a cup of steaming tea that smelled like cinnamon. She wasn't used to such small kindnesses. Once, when he handed her a data tablet, his hand brushed hers, rough, warm, alive. She froze for a second, not out of fear, but because it had been so long since anyone had touched her without hesitation. Elias only smiled and said, "We'll make these shields better than anything in this sector." And they did. Together, they developed a hybrid defense system, Velnar crystalwork mixed with human alloys, that could protect entire colonies from chemical storms. When they ran the first test, the energy field held steady under double the expected pressure. The human engineers cheered. Even the skeptical council scientists had to admit it was a success. That evening, as the lab lights dimmed, Sura stood by the viewport, watching a storm swirl across the nearby planet's clouds. "I never thought my people's work would mean something again," she said softly. Elias joined her, leaning on the railing. "You gave us more than science," he replied. "You gave us hope." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not just a soldier or diplomat, but a man who had chosen to see her not for what she looked like, but for what she carried inside. But peace never lasted long in a galaxy full of politics. One night, while the research team was preparing a demonstration for the council, alarms screamed through the corridors. A sudden blast rocked the entire section. The lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. Sura was thrown off her feet as the wall behind her cracked open. Fire erupted from a console. The air smelled of burning metal. She heard humans shouting, and then Elias's voice calling her name. She tried to stand, but her leg was caught under a collapsed support beam. Sparks rained down around her. "Go!" she shouted. "The core's unstable." But Elias didn't run. Through the smoke, she saw his silhouette moving closer. He coughed hard, his eyes stinging, but he kept coming. "I'm not leaving you here." He gripped the beam with both hands and pulled. His arms trembled, his teeth gritted. The metal groaned but didn't move. He tried again, this time bracing his foot and pushing upward. "Stop," Sura yelled, choking on the smoke. "You'll die." He ignored her. "So will you." With one last surge, the beam shifted. He dragged her clear just as a second explosion tore through the chamber. The force threw them both across the floor. The world went black. When Elias woke, everything was white and silent. He was lying in the medical ward, wrapped in healing mesh, every muscle aching. A faint hum filled the air. Then he heard a voice, and soft, trembling, familiar. "You should not have done that." He turned his head. Sura sat beside his bed, her face half lit by the gentle glow of monitors. Her skin looked paler than before, and one of her arms was bandaged. Elias tried to smile. "You're alive," he said weakly. "That's all that matters," she shook her head. "You burned your hands. You inhaled smoke. You could have died. Would have been a bad day for diplomacy," he joked. For a long moment she said nothing. Then with slow, deliberate movement she reached out and placed her rough hand over his. "No one has ever done something like that for me," she whispered. "Not in centuries," he met her eyes. "Then maybe it's time someone did." Days passed as they healed. Word of what had happened spread through the station. Every corridor echoed with the same story. The human who saved the Velnar. The same people who once turned away from Sura now stood when she entered the room. The Galactic Council launched an investigation and discovered that the explosion wasn't an accident. It was sabotage by extremists who believed humans and Velnar should never cooperate. Ironically, their attack only united the two species even more. When the council met again, Sura walked slowly into the hall. For the first time, the delegates fell silent, not out of judgment but respect. She looked different now, not because her scars were gone, but because her posture was proud. Captain Elias Ward stood beside her, still bandaged but steady. When the council president asked if she had anything to say, she stepped forward. She spoke simply. "For too long we have measured worth by how smooth one's skin is or how perfect one's world looks. But perfection does not build peace. Courage does. The humans have shown that, and so must we." Her words carried across the chamber like quiet thunder. No one interrupted. When she finished, the council voted unanimously to approve the Velnar Accord, restoring her people's honor and opening full cooperation with Earth. After the meeting, the press from a dozen species gathered outside, lights flashing. Cameras caught the moment when Sura and Elias stood together before the council seal. A reporter asked, "Captain Ward, do humans see the Velnar as equals now?" Elias looked at Sura, then back at the cameras. "We always did," he said simply. Later, when the hall emptied, they found themselves back on the same observation deck where it had all begun. The stars shimmered beyond the glass. "You changed their minds," Elias said. She smiled faintly. "No, you showed them how." They stood in silence again, watching a comet pass across the dark. She turned slightly, her amber eyes soft. "You risked your life for me, human." "I'd do it again," he said. "I know," she whispered. "That is what makes your kind dangerous and beautiful." He laughed quietly. "Dangerous and beautiful, huh? I'll take that." Her gaze drifted toward the stars. "Perhaps one day the galaxy will learn from you." He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Maybe it already has. And there they stood, the human who refused to follow fear, and the alien who dared to hope again. Two souls from distant worlds bound by one simple truth. Humanity's greatest power was never its weapons or machines. It was the courage to see beauty where others saw none. From that day on, no one ever called Sura of the Velnar ugly again. They called her ambassador, hero, and sometimes, and when she wasn't listening, friend of Earth. And in the great halls of the Galactic Council, there would forever be two seats side by side, one for the human, and one for the alien who once sat alone. Would you like me to make a short visual image prompt for this story? For